Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our Monday DraftKings NBA picks video. What we decided to do today is put up a little slideshow that gives some of the studs, some of the more expensive mid-range options, and then some of the cheaper options who we think are viable, and guys that we're looking to put into our rosters. So let's call up the slideshow and talk about some of the guys who we like for Monday's slate. The three things we're going to do. We're going to talk about those stud guys, which are like the 10K and up kind of guys. We're going to talk about the mid-range guys who are in the 8K and below range. And then we're going to talk about some cheaper options who are like 6K, 5K, 4K, who we think are viable guys to round out those rosters for you. The first group of guys we're going to talk about are the studs. If you can fit two of these guys into your lineup today, I think it would be a good thing to try to do, although I'm not sure you're going to be able to unless we get some more value that opens up. The three guys that are in the stud category for me today are James Harden. He's been averaging 64 points over his last 64 DraftKings points over his last 3 games. As long as Dwight Howard is out, he's the guy that's been picking up the pace, putting up some big numbers. He had an 80-point game, a 65-point game, another one that was in like the high 40s. So he's been consistent with his floor and also shown the upside. I do like the matchup here against New Orleans. New Orleans is a team that's been playing faster, putting up a ton of points. So I think that this is going to be one of those games for James Harden. Next guy I want to talk about is DeMarcus Cousins, who's $11,000. You also have Anthony Davis at $10,000 at the power forward position today. I just think that Cousins has been so good lately that it's tough not to use him or tough to use Anthony Davis over him. Cousins' floor lately has been 48 fantasy points, and he has 6 games where he's gone over 60 in his last 11, including a game that he got up into the 70s. Anthony Davis is a guy who's $10,000, but he's basically only been hitting about 47, 48, 49 fantasy points lately. Is he consistent? Yes, he's been very consistently doing that, which would give Anthony Davis a shot to be a solid cash game play. But I think DeMarcus Cousins has been just as consistent and also has the upside for a tournament that you look for, and a really good matchup against Charlotte, who is basically without all of their starting big guys. He might see some Kaminsky defense. He might see some Spencer Hall's defense. He might see a little Marvin Williams defense. And I don't think any of those guys have a chance to check Boogie. The next guy I want to talk about is Steph Curry. Steph's been putting up 30-plus real-life points with 50-plus fantasy points over his last couple games. He's been giving you 6 rebounds, 6 assists, a couple steals. He's hitting about 6 3-pointers over his last 11 games. So, I mean, this guy is just straight filling up the stat sheet for you. It's a tough matchup against the San Antonio Spurs. Even though the Spurs are good on paper, I think point guard is a spot that you can attack them at. So Steph Curry, who's been playing really well today, I still think he's going to put up his points. I still think he's going to have a big game. And again, that game has a total of like 212 points, with the Warriors being favored by, I think, 6 at the moment. So they're expecting like 110 points out of the Warriors here. And when the Warriors score $110, lately they've been scoring $120, $130 almost, because they've just been absolutely on fire. Steph Curry usually is the big reason for it and has a lot to do with it. Now we're going to talk about some of those mid-range guys, those guys that are in that 8K range that we think you're going to have to put, probably 2 of these guys with one of the studs on your roster today. I really like Kemba Walker again in a fast-paced game against Sacramento. Without Nick Batum, he's the one guy on that Charlotte team that can really up his scoring. You're without Big Al Jefferson. You're without Cody Zeller. You're without Nick Batum. There's a good chance you're without Jeremy Lamb. If Lamb and Batum don't play today, I think Walker's going to be that guy that has to put the scoring load on his shoulders. Don't get crazy if he doesn't have a big score by halftime. He's a guy that in the first half kind of, plays the distributor role. He doesn't get huge minutes in the second quarter, but he basically plays almost the entire third and fourth quarter of these games. That's why they give him a little bit of a less time in the second quarter to kind of give him a little bit of a rest so that he can play the whole third and the fourth. He had some monster second halves, 30 and 50 points in the last 2 games. He's put up 70-something and 40-something in his last 2. And again, this is a high-paced matchup, high-scoring game against Sacramento. I think it's a really good spot for him. And I think even at 8,600, if Batum and Lamb are out, I still think you can be able to roll Kemba out there and feel pretty good about it. Kawhi Leonard at only 8K is just way too cheap for me against the Warriors. Huge total in this game. Tim Duncan is out. You got to expect Kawhi Leonard to really, pick up his game here. This is a game that I know he wants to win, and he wants to prove to everybody that he is one of the best players in the league. At only 8,000, you need 40 to 50 fantasy points out of him for cash game to GPP value. And I think there's a good chance that he gets you in that range and maybe even above it today. If the San Antonio Spurs are going to beat the Warriors today, I think you're going to need a huge game out of Kawhi. He's a guy that can score. He rebounds. He assists. Plays great defense, pick up some blocks and steals for you. And I think at 8K, he's a little bit too cheap. He's going to be on a lot of my rosters at the small forward spot. Probably one of my favorite plays on the day is Paul Millsap at the powered forward spot. His price is really good in a really high-paced game against a weak Denver defense guarding big men. Millsap attended a funeral this weekend, so he has a questionable tag next to his name. But that Q tag doesn't mean a thing because, again, it's not like he was injured. It's not like he was hurt. He had a funeral to attend. It was family reasons that he's been out. So if that Q tag scares some people away, along with the fact that a lot of people are going to be looking at Anthony Davis and Boogie Cousins at that power forward spot, I think Millsap is easily one of the best plays that you can have in the tournament today because I think he's going to go at lower ownership, and I think he has a chance to go 6 or 7 times value against a really weak Denver team in a high total game that has a pretty close spread. The last thing I want to do is give you some of those cheap options. These are the glue guys that we try to use to round out some of our rosters. I think Mike Conley's in a really good spot at the point guard spot at 6,200. Goes up against Orlando, who just gave up 70 points the other day to Kemba Walker. And Marc Gasol is not 100%. So with Gasol not being 100%, I think Conley's going to be asked to do more creating for both himself and others. And I think at 6,200, he's just a little bit too cheap in this matchup. You can also look at a guy like Drew Holiday, who, is getting expensive and hasn't been playing a ton of minutes, but he's been a consistent 30 to 35 fantasy points in most of his recent games. Goes up against Houston, should be a high-paced game. He plays a lot at the 2 alongside Norris Cole or alongside Tyreek Evans, depending on how they match up. So if he winds up drawing a little bit of, James Harden defense, we know that that's something that, we really like and want to exploit. At the shooting guard spot, like I said, I think Harden is one of those guys that you kind of almost have to pay up for today. He's the guy that I'm going to be paying up for the most because I just don't really like the cheaper options at the shooting guard spot. Sure, you can look at guys like Avery Bradley or KCP, maybe even like a J.R. Smith or a Gary Harris or a Kyle Korver if you want to go real cheap. But none of that really excites me all that much, which is why I think of the studs, the guy that I want to pay up for today is going to be James Harden. Looking at the small forward options, you got guys like, Trevor Ariza, who's been hitting his three-pointers and putting up some pretty good scores lately. Seeing a few more minutes in that, smaller lineup that Houston's been running out. You also have Matt Barnes, who I like a lot, especially if Tony Allen is out tonight. If Tony Allen's in, it's getting a little crowded there with, Conley and, with Conley at the point, and then you got Lee and Chalmers who need minutes. You got Barnes and Greens who need minutes. You got, Tony Allen if he's in who needs minutes. So I really would probably only look his way if Tony Allen's out. But again, at 5,200, he's been getting you 25 to 30 fantasy points. That's 5-6x value for a guy that I think is in a pretty good spot, although it is a low total game. The next guy I want to talk about is Shabazz Muhammad. If you don't know this guy, he's a small forward for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's also played a little bit of the 2-guard spot. Him and Andrew Wiggins together have kind of been, alternating small forward shooting guard. I don't really think it matters with the two of them out on the floor. I think, if anything, LeBron is going to be the one who draws the matchup with Andrew Wiggins, which means that Muhammad, who's been putting up 20 to 30 fantasy points recently at only 4,500, is in another good spot to give you a 5 or 6x performance. I don't love his upside. I don't think he gets you 40 fantasy points, but I think he does enough to get you value at that $4,500 price. And then if Lamb and Batum are out again, we saw a big game from PJ Hairston at below 4,000 his last time out. I think he's still down at like 3,800, so he could be that salary saver that you need in order to fit in that second stud. But remember, if Batum and or Lamb are playing, I think that really ticks down his potential production. At the power forward spot, it looks like Kenneth Faried is going to be out again. So you got a decent option going with Darrell Arthur at 4,500. He's been putting up close to double-doubles when he's been seeing the minutes. So if he double-doubles for you here, he's going to get you 25, 30 fantasy points. He'll be a viable guy to put in there. David West has a tough matchup against Golden State. Might see a little bit of Draymond Green defense, but he's only $4,000, as is Josh Smith, who's been seeing 20 to 25 minutes since being traded this weekend over to the Houston Rockets. Smith is a guy who just jacks up shots. He can grab a few rebounds for you. He'll get you a couple blocks and steals with his length. So he can easily pay off 20 to 25 points, which is what he needs at only 4K. Moving over to the center position, I really like Gortat because Boston struggles to stop big guys. It's a high total game over here. His price is reasonable at 7K. This looks like a really good game to target for fantasy, but really there aren't a lot of guys that I like. With Thomas and Smart and Bradley and Turner all healthy and, Amir Johnson healthy and David Lee and Kelly Olynyk. You know, they're just rolling guys in and out of this lineup. Apparently, the only guy who is safe minutes-wise seems to be Jay Crowder, who's been playing like 30 to 32 minutes a game recently. Again, to go back to that Celtics team, I do actually like Jared Sellinger a little bit, who's been seeing a few more minutes lately. You know, the front court is not as good as, you know, the backcourt, basically. They got a couple guys in that 1, 2, 3 spots that I really like, but when you look at some of their big guys, I mean, Olynyk's nothing special. You know, David Lee doesn't even really play anymore, and Amir Johnson's not a guy who can play more than like 25 to 30 minutes. So Sellinger's been seeing a lot of court time. He's pretty cheap at 5,500. He's definitely under the radar today, and I think in a high-paced game like this one against Washington, he might be a decent viable option for you to look at. And then we have some of the cheap guys. You got Nikola Jokic at 4,700, probably my least favorite of the three. Willie Cauley-Stein at 4,500. Again, take a look at his game logs. 20, 25 minutes recently. He's been putting up, you know, 20 to 30 fantasy points. So he's been in a pretty good spot. I think he's another guy that you can roll out here today. I do like the matchup for him. And then the last guy is Spencer Hawes, who does not have a great matchup. But again, at 4,100 for a guy who's going to be playing 28 to 32 minutes without Big Al Jefferson and Cody Zeller, I think Spencer Hawes is another guy that you can look at as a glue guy to help you put it together. So that pretty much sums up my ideas and my thoughts on this Monday slate here for DFS. You know, like I said, I'm going to be paying up for probably one stud in my lineup, whether that be James Harden or whether it be, you know, Boogie Cousins. I don't like these swerves at the shooting guard spot. So I think that position scarcity is why it's pushing me to pay up for Harden over there. There are options at the point guard spot that I like Kemba Walker and Mike Conley, who are a little cheaper. There are options at the power forward spots that I like. You know, as I told you guys, Paul Millsap, one of my favorite plays today. I probably won't be paying up for LeBron, which means that you got to go cheap over there. You know, guys like Kirsten and Shabazz can help you fit in some of these studs. You know, if you take Harden at the shooting guard, Harden at the shooting guard spot, you're probably also going to have to go cheap at center. You got guys like Willie Cauley-Stein and Hawes and Jokic, who we talked about. I think you can fit them into your lineup, and, you know, putting all those guys together, I think you'll be able to round out a lineup, keep it under the value, and still give yourself a lot of upside here today. So that's how I'm going to be building my lineups. You know, I got a couple tickets to the $300 three ball tonight. Hopefully I can take a nice big cash out of there and, you know, start this week off pretty nice for NBA DFS. So from all of us here at RotoCurve to all you guys out there, good luck tonight. And as always, stay classy, DFS.